Hello everyone, my name is Conrad Rogas and welcome back to the How to Live the Warrior Path series. Another episode. Last episode we talked about the unity and ultimate goal of the warrior path. It was a real general one, it was a real profound one, talking about the totality, the ultimate goal. Okay, it feels like I've done like 5 intro episodes now. So the path is actually beginning now. We're actually going to talk about the duality and the polarity of the warrior path, because this thing is all about choices, right? So we're really gonna talk into how to do this on an everyday basis. What is it like to be the warrior? So it's time to talk about duality. It's time to talk about the 2 aspects of a warrior's life. War, as the name says, the one part of it is war. War is a part of the warrior's life. The actual war, the actual fighting against oppressors, fighting against addictions, fighting with the demons and the darkness within yourself, right? This is known as war. And then you have peace. You have the peacetime. So the warrior actually spends about maybe 2% of his time, of his whole life, in the actual battle. Whether this is a spiritual warrior or some other kind of warrior, or a literal, like samurai or martial artist. You're spending only a little bit, a short outburst in the actual struggles and battles in your life. So what about that other 98%? That's why we're starting with this. This episode is about the peacetime. It's not about the actual war, because if you're spending 98% of your time in peacetime, then that way you have to start with that. And this is what the episode's all about. So, many people wouldn't have even looked into the warrior path this far, because the warrior part of it, the war, the actual battle part, is what turns them off. So many people don't resonate with the concept of a warrior because they're pacifists. So, they don't want to kill anybody, they don't want to do violence to anybody, neither do I. So they don't look into something like the warrior path that doesn't appeal to them. But the warrior rarely actually kills. The warrior is not a killer. It's not a butcher. It's not somebody who slaughters. Like, this is not what a warrior is. We've totally misinterpreted this word. What warriors do, what real warriors do, most of their actions, their whole life, you can ask them. You can ask a martial artist. You can ask a soldier. What do they usually do? They mostly train. It's mostly about training. That's 98% of the time that the warrior spends. That 98% of the actions he does have to do with training. It is at peacetime. And the reason men and women fail and never become warriors is not because they can't win a fight or battle an enemy, right? It's because they cannot defeat the enemy in everyday life. They cannot defeat themselves in everyday life. We're talking in the comfort, peace, and quiet. This is where we cannot defeat the enemy. And yes, the enemy is ourselves. It is internal first. You have to beat yourself first. Otherwise, there is no warrior path. There is no point. You have to beat yourself. Not beat yourself up as in like this, but to build yourself up, you're gonna need to battle the current ruler, the current the person currently running the show within you, which is always a perverted version of you that's not the fully actualized you. It's a part of you, but it's you clouded by all the trauma and clouded by all the bad decisions and the calcifications and hardenings of struggling against an oppressive world, trying to maintain your inner egocentrism, actually. So this is the inner enemy. It's the shadow self, people have called this, right? The darkness within yourself. So how do you defeat the enemy in peacetime? Well, it's the self-improvement lifestyle. So this is what the warrior path is, right? So I'm just gonna have to explain the same thing again in different words. It's the journey of self-mastery. So number 1, you have to be honest with yourself. And really, that's the only sentence that needs to be said, and I could just end the video now. But people can hear that, say, okay, I have to be honest with myself. We hear it, and then it goes in one ear and out the other, because that sounds good in the abstract, but we cannot apply, we forget to apply that concept when it actually needs to be applied in the situation uh, where its presence is invoked, where it should be present, right? So what am I talking about being honest with yourself? It's usually at the times where you won't even think about it. So you got to start with doing some real annoying programming within yourself to just remind yourself to be honest. Anytime you feel bad about something, just remind yourself, is there something I have to look at myself for? Is there something I'm not being honest with myself about? Because self-deception is something that's always it's always sneaky. We never know we're fooling ourselves. It's always done behind our own backs, right? So that's why this is a tough one, but it's the first step for a reason, right? Step two, or it's not like a stepwise progression, but another thing is the putting the blame and responsibility for all the things that are going on in the world, in your life, putting it on you, even if it's not your fault. So it doesn't matter if it's true or not, right? Anytime something happens in your life, and this is not saying to take the blame in front of the world or take the blame in front of others, but in your own mind, you should be taking the blame for everything that happens, even if it's not your fault, because this builds integrity. This builds your character from the inside. Anything that happens to you, resist the urge to make any excuses. Say, okay, I'm going to be honest with myself, and I'm going to say, I could have done this differently. This negative outcome that happens is my fault and my fault only. That'll go a long way towards developing the warrior within yourself. Next step is to work hard to try to learn new things, good things that work well, and unlearn bad things that don't work well. Again, this seems super simple, right? But you actually need to stay on yourself to do this. Perfect example is in my everyday work. I do construction. This is how this whole idea came to me. You notice this if you have a job you're doing, you get into a system and it feels comfortable, okay? If you're drilling screws in and you have a system, you're like, okay, you're going to take these three, you're going to go one by one, and you have a system, then you put the board and you have to do 100 of these, right? Well, you won't want to unlearn that system even if another one works well, because you get comfortable, something worked, you got over the initial fear or anxiety of not knowing how to do something. Now you know how to do it and you feel good about it. You want to continue doing it. You don't want to give up the fruits of that kind of behavior to now start a behavior from scratch and go into the fear and anxiety again. But this is exactly what you need to do, and this is what a real warrior does. It's like you're fighting somebody, you're in the cage fighting with somebody, and you manage to win, you escape with your life, and you just want to kind of enjoy it. You want to just be happy and never go back in there again. You need to turn your ass around, go back into the cage and do it again, risk it all again. Okay, this is part of the warrior lifestyle, and many people just don't see life as this big struggle, this heroic struggle, but it is. This is the whole point of the warrior path, and it doesn't matter if you're an accountant or a construction worker. You're supposed to apply this to your life. If I was about to say, if you don't do it for yourself, you at least do it for your family, right? But the truth is, you have to do it for yourself. If you don't do it for yourself, you're not going to be a warrior, right? This is a journey of self-mastery. You need to care about yourself and respect yourself enough to want to be that good, right? And the ultimate step of this is kind of puts a bow on the rest of them. You have to reset every day and want to improve every day. So what I said about reminding yourself to be honest with yourself, to try new things. You have to wake up every day and not just forget that you ever saw this episode. You need to wake up every day like it's a new day, like you have a big important thing going on. And you have to set your mind up in a way that you're going to actually try to beat yourself. Like, how you do this, there are different techniques, right? You need to, if you need to craft an enemy that you're struggling against, do that. I do this. I'll take a character from a book I'm reading, and I'll want to struggle against him, because if you have to create a character, create him. because you may not have anybody that's really pushing you in your everyday life. This is the problem. We don't have many great men and women in everyday life that we could look up to and say, oh, I got to be more like him. Oftentimes, you could see them on TV playing football, but you don't seriously think, okay, I'm going to try to be better than Patrick Mahomes today, because you won't do it. But you should be. You should be looking up to great people and wanting to be better. This is a healthy thing, right? So those are kind of the characteristics of the self-improvement lifestyle of mastery. Another thing you have to do in peacetime, remember we're talking about what you do not really in the actual war. This is just how you train. This is just how you approach every day, right? Try to obtain high control of your faculties, which are what? The faculties of a conscious being are actions, thoughts, and emotions. So obtaining high control, meaning being in control, being in charge. You're the one. You run the things in your life, right? So running your actions. This is best done not thinking about big actions, right? Like important things, but things you do every day and don't think about. So think about the actions you're taking. Do you bite your nails like I do? If you bite your nails, you have to, next time you do it, just ask yourself, why? Why am I doing this, right? Do you leave things out of place and forget them? And you do this every day? If you see things occurring in your life and they're kind of like routine things, ask yourself, like, why are you doing that? When you ask yourself these things, that's kind of that moment of honesty, putting the mirror up to you and giving yourself a chance to find the reasons behind it, right? If you're biting your nails, this is anxiety coming from somewhere. It's an emotion that's unreleased, right? If you're forgetting things, it could be many different factors, but say you figure out that you're really putting off something that you had to do. And if you just ask yourself the question, you give yourself the opportunity to at least look into it. And that answer would have never come to you. It would just be in the subconscious. You got to bring it to the surface, right? So then your thoughts. If you're worrying, are you worrying about somebody else's opinion of you? What anybody else thinks of you? If you are, most people do, just ask yourself, do they matter? Does that person actually matter to me? And if you're honest with yourself, the answer should be no. Are you thinking about something, a mode of thinking that is going to make you sabotage yourself? If you feel it coming on? If you just ask these questions, you'll actually get ahead of yourself, because it's not just buried in like a haze in our subconscious. If you actually ask yourself these questions, then it becomes real, and then you can move forward. Your body will actually protect you. Like, it will actually search these answers out. If you just give it a little bit of a chance by at least making these thoughts concrete and at least bringing the memory into your life to actually remind yourself to just think about the reasons you do things. And of course, emotions, the big one. Are you feeling bad in a situation that should be good? If you are, you got to ask yourself why. What's under the surface? What is going on that I don't see? Because every emotion has a purpose. There's no purposeless emotions. These things are here for a reason, right? So say if you're feeling nothing in an extraordinary time, a time where you think you should be feeling emotions, then you got to ask yourself, well, am I suppressing something? Am I repressing something, right? The thing about emotions is they always have a purpose. So if you're feeling guilty, but you don't really feel like you should be feeling guilty for something, it's time to really think. Well, whenever you feel things, a good thing to do is not act, but think. Like, why am I feeling this way? And then, if you're good at this, you're going to go back in time, you're going to go back in your memory to figure out what are some of these other times I felt this emotion. And really the goal is to figure out where it came from. Because if you find the origin, you can solve the problem. So that's high control of your faculties. Along those lines, another aspect of being the warrior in peacetime is maintaining and maximizing the tools you wield. So what am I talking about? Nunchucks, swords, guns, shields. Not necessarily, obviously, because we're not talking. This is a 2023 adaptation of the warrior path. So you guys probably aren't, warrior monks or knights or Spartans. So we're not talking about those kinds of tools. But any warrior's tools, spiritual, physical, or emotional, or otherwise, kind of a warrior, your first tool is your body. Your most important tool is your body. This is our temple. This is our shield and armor and weapon. So how do you maintain it? First, you cut out the addictions. You cut out the alcohol, you cut out the weed, and you cut out the cigarettes. I'm not saying you do it all at once. I did. I basically did. It wasn't as simple as I'm saying it. It took a little bit. You could relapse. You do a little bit here and there, but basically, I stopped this stuff all at the same time. And I had other stuff that I was stopping at the same time. And I do mention the weed, and obviously, I support the use of cannabis. Right? I support the use of cannabis for medicinal properties and for relaxation properties. I'm not against even having a drink, even though it is a tox. Even things that are toxic, you could, I'm not an absolutist when it comes to this stuff, and it's really not about my opinion anyway. It's just about how much you respect your own temple and your own tool. So I support cannabis, obviously, especially for things like cancer, but let's not mess around. We know that most people are using it as a crutch to escape reality and avoid working on themselves. So you got to cut that stuff out, right? If you want to be a warrior. Those are the addictions, breaking out of the habits of food and drink, which can become addictions, right? So what's the right way to eat and drink? What is the diet I'm talking about? I had 4 things and I lined them up from most important to least important, so you know where I stand on this, right? Because I know there's a lot of talk about diet and what the right diet is, what the wrong diet is. The most important thing about eating right is you got to find the stuff that's least processed, first of all. Because the processing techniques, the longer the expiration date is, the more chemically it's packaged, the more mass factory produced it is, the more time it's spent at the assembly line, the more toxic it is going to be one way or another. So we got to get the least processed stuff in us first. So what's not processed? Well, you got your fruits, you got your vegetables. I hope you see where I'm going. I'll talk about meat, but if you got a source of protein and it's the least processed as possible, like eggs, that you should be doing that. You should be trying to get the least processed things possible directly from nature. That's the stuff that's going to help you be strong and aware. Number 2 is you got to find the stuff with the highest nutrient content. You would think that's number 1, but I actually think the mass processing is the biggest devil we have. So even if you eat something that's not very nutritious, if it's only not processed, that's you'll at least be able to satisfy your hunger without poisoning yourself. That's what I'm getting at, right? But then highest nutrient content, which is where all of your fuel basically is going to come from. And what has the highest nutrient content? In terms of, how it should be presented in terms of density or weight, like nutritional value per pound or something like that, or per cubic meter. It's going to be organic fruits and vegetables. That's the truth. That's your highest nutrient concentration. Then number 3 with what food you should be eating is whatever has the least amount of chemicals and pesticides. The chemicals and the pesticides, I almost don't want to put this at 3 because it is so important. These chemicals they're putting out here. But here's the thing. Even these chemicals, if you have stuff that's not processed and you're feeding it nutrients, you're going to give your body what it needs to fight these chemicals and detoxify your own body, which you can't do. And then last, I will put that it should be organic matter, not animal flesh, right? And for the purposes of the Warrior Path episode, the reason you don't want to be eating meat, the reason you don't want to be eating animal flesh, is not because even because of being kind to the animals or being environmental. It's really because the animal flesh will make you weak and lethargic. And that's the thing. It's going to make you tired. This is the truth. You're going to see very few real warriors, mind, body, and spirit, who are eating animal meat. Those are just the facts. You're going to be weak. You might be able to bench press more than me, but I bet you won't be able to go head to head with me until exhaustion. And that's the trade-off with animal flesh. It's kind of getting a shot of energy. You're consuming it. It assimilates less effectively. But that's occult nutrition. I'm not going into occult nutrition. This is just basic warrior techniques, right? So that's your food and drink. We talked about the addiction. What else? Mental skills, right? So that's part of your body too, your mind. Number one, concentration and focus. Now, I could make a whole episode about that, but I really don't want to stretch myself out too thin, because I could talk about concentration and focus for 20 minutes, and when it comes down to it, you just have to figure it out yourself. You just need to stay on yourself. There are a million books about concentration and focus. You got to care enough to want to be focused. You got to find something that you care about so much it kind of makes you like a little bit intimidated. That's the best way to become the warriors. Find something that makes you intimidated enough to not be willing to stay as you are now. Do what you got to do. But I want to talk about another technique that is a very good mental technique that most people don't talk about, and it's dissociation. I think it's very useful. They teach the special ops people this for sure. So why not us? Why not teach yourself to practice a bit of dissociation? Meaning what? Meaning you take your mind out of where you are in the current moment, and in a stoic way, just really not be there, so that whatever happens to you in that moment, you're not going to be so tied into it. You're going to be able to, it's not going to completely fracture you or tear you apart, right? So dissociation is, we always see it as a negative thing, because unfortunately dissociation happens to people usually because of extreme trauma that they undergo, right? So torture, rape, things like that, that's when people tend to dissociate. But if you're really trying to be the warrior, you should look into this, because dissociation might really help you. If you're in a time where you just got hurt, you just got, somebody just dropped an anvil on your head emotionally, that's time to practice some dissociation, because your body is actually, as a temple, is not very useful to you at that moment. You're only going to hurt yourself. You need to take your consciousness and just put it somewhere else for a bit, and then re-enter your temple when it's useful to you. And then you could keep going, so that you don't make things worse for yourself. But the most important mental skill, I keep saying this in this episode, it's memory. And I'll say it in a different way, like remembering pain, right? Remembering bad outcomes. I think we have a really short memory as people when it just comes to things happening that we didn't like. People have such a short memory when it comes to, like, a perfect example is a hangover. Everybody knows how bad it feels to have a hangover, and what does everybody say every morning after they drink? They say, I'm never drinking alcohol again. Why, are they lying about that? No, they were serious. In that moment, they would correct, and if they always could feel that, they would never touch it again. But they forget. We have a short memory when it comes to suffering. So reminding yourself that you were in a position and how bad that position was. Memory is one of the most profound tools that a warrior has. If you could put yourself back into the situation and remember how much you hated that situation, that will make it so that you can take the necessary steps, the tough steps, so you could sacrifice the time and effort necessary to never end up in that position again. Don't be the one who has to learn the same lesson more than once. Nobody likes to be that person. So memory. Okay? So just to sum it up real quick, I have a little bit more. So we got to maintain the mind, body, and spirit is essentially what this is all about, right? You do this so that the external factors do not break you as the warrior, and the internal factors don't break him either. The external factors don't influence you, and your internal factors don't break you, because Oftentimes what happens is the warrior breaks himself from the inside because the trauma is unresolved. Remember, it's you that's your biggest enemy as the warrior. That you're the final boss that you're gonna have to face, right? And of course it is this way. I hope you could appreciate the poetic nature of this, because it really is like a story where, you know, you're gonna defeat you're gonna go through on all the quests, you're gonna defeat all of the enemies, pass all the obstacles, and at the end you basically have to face the ultimate villain, which is the evil you, so to speak. So you work on your mind, body, and spirit, because just like the mind, body, and spirit seeks stillness, the warrior also seeks stillness, and what the warrior actually seeks is peace, not war. So that's the big secret, that's the big paradox here. The warrior doesn't actually go to war. The warrior is trying to get peace done. The warrior uses war as a means to get to peace when it is necessary, because we live in a world where people don't want to let us have peace. They want to be all up in our business, and they make the warrior come out. This shouldn't even be necessary, but there's so much trauma and violence in the world, right? So the warrior path thus is necessary. But that's the essence of the warrior's victory in peacetime. It's to be still. It's not being pulled in a million directions, right? It's being able to be still. And when you choose a task, you carry the task out to its completion. You see it out to its completion. The smallest task, you know, the dumbest thing is washing the dishes, brushing your teeth. Just don't get distracted. Whatever you do, see that you carry that task to its completion. And when you do this, you feel strong and fulfilled, even if it's a minor thing, even if you don't notice this. When you say you're going to do something and then you do it like this, like no steps to the side, no thinking, no daydreaming, you just do it. When you do this, you're more likely to succeed again in the next task. And that's a feedback loop. You're going to be more likely then to carry it out to completion again. Right? And then you'll feel even better about yourself. So then you'll keep doing it and you'll keep getting stronger. And this is what it is. This is why Shia LaBeouf did that video where he's like, just do it. Because this is how it sounds. This is how it sounds when you're trying to explain the warrior concept to somebody. And you kind of just want to just go like this and just repeat the same thing. But it's an internal struggle, you know. This is months and months and years. But it's actually not that hard. And you can't do this, right? There's a reason you're watching this video right now. You found this video, right? You want to be here. I don't know why, but you know, you chose to be here. The warrior path is for you. If you're here by this episode, you got this. In this world, we have enemies we will never see. This is another thing. It's not really peacetime. We have enemies right now. I have enemies that I don't really see. I don't mean like in my head. I'm not saying that. But what are the enemies I'm talking about? The advertisers and the fast food corporations. They want us weak and unhealthy, right? Only for their money. I'm not even talking about some conspiracy type of control agenda. Listen, they just want their money, so they want you weak and fat, so you can keep buying their stuff, right? Of course. The pharmaceutical companies then want us what? Sick and unhealthy. Are we really going to lie to ourselves and say that's not the case? Be honest with yourself. But then the real enemy, as I've said, the biggest enemy, it is ourselves. And it's the part of us that is attached to comfort and afraid of change. That's why it's our enemy. It's not because we hate ourselves or that we want to destroy ourselves. It's just because that part within us, that part that hasn't really grown up, is holding on to the little bit of comfort that it has in life, and it's afraid of change. And we need to defeat that part of ourselves out of love, not out of hatred. You could see it as hatred of weakness, and to be honest with you, I see it that way a lot. Most of the warrior-like actions that I take part in, they're motivated by negative emotions more than positive. But you know what? That's love too. You're doing it out of the part where you love that part of yourself. You have to love that part of yourself, and that part that other people have in them. If you don't like the idea of loving yourself, because I know people think that's like super narcissistic and egotistical, right? Even though it's not. But if you gotta love that part of yourself, and you want it to not be suffering as much as it is. You want it to be happy. And the only way you can really be happy in the world, really, is if you're really striving to be the best version of you. And that's what it is. And these are the enemies at peacetime. And how we deal with these enemies is what truly defines the warrior. The warrior is defined during peacetime. Thank you very much for viewing this episode. I enjoyed that one. I hope you have enjoyed it as well. And join me next time. We're going to talk about the actual war. Now we're going to talk about the fun stuff. Now we're going to talk about the real fun stuff. But this was fun too. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.